Call to order this March 6th work session meeting of the Grant County Board of Commissioners. Welcome, everyone. If you'll please join with us as we salute the American flag and the state flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico as a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Who's lost that? Sorry. Consideration of approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Agenda, all in favor?
Aye.
Agenda approved then. The general purpose of the county work session is to inform the Grant County Board of Commissioners of agenda items that will be addressed at the next regular meeting on Thursday, and for department heads and other elected officials to communicate with the commissioners in regard to matters in their respective departments. In accordance with Grant County Resolution number 18-1, we welcome the public to attend the county work session. However, there will be no public input at this meeting. Agenda item number 5, state fire conditions. We have in the Gila National Forest, we have with us Mr. Gabe Olguin from the Fire Staff Officer for the Gila National Forest. Mr. Olguin, welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. This on?
No?
Is the button on?
How about there? There we go. Good.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, how's everybody doing this morning?
Thanks.
All right. So I'd like to just give you a short presentation on what we're expecting this fire season here on the Gila National Forest, and basically in the Southwest region, which also includes Arizona and part of West Texas. I'll try to focus mainly on Grant County and what's going on here and what the Gila National Forest is expecting. So first off, I just wanted to share this PowerPoint with you. It's the 2018 Fire Season Outlook, and it's provided to us by our Southwest Predictive Services Group, which is up in Albuquerque. They're part of our interagency center up there, which provides oversight for the Forest Service, the BLM, the BIA, and also the state. So it's a good partnership up there. So yeah, we'll jump right into that first. We'll go over that outlook. Okay, I'm going to skip a few slides here. First slide is these are the factors that they look at when they start talking about fire season and what we might expect. The first one is drought, the condition of the drought, the current status of the drought. The second one is the condition of the fine fuels out there, which is mainly the grasses, the pine needles, the forbs, those types of vegetation. The third factor is the seasonal temperature and precipitation. So where are we at? Where did we come from, and where are we headed with the seasonal temp and precip? And then we look at spring and early summer weather patterns. You know, the potential for different weather in the spring, which we've already seen the last few weeks. And then the onset of the monsoon, whether it's going to be early on time or late, delayed. So those are the factors that they take into consideration, and we'll go through each one of those. As you can expect, you know, droughts increased from west to east across the region over the last 5 to 6 months. We definitely had a very dry winter, and you know, at least moderate drought to severe drought. We could see that within the region as we progress into May, June, and July. Basically, they're calling for the drought to persist at least through May, and you know, at that beginning in June is when we start seeing moisture coming up from the Gulf, and we get into our monsoon season as we progress through June. So we would see potentially some relief from the drought in June, and that's why they that's why it's persisting through May. Drought is impacting mainly the fine fuel regimes across the east, but starting to have long-term impacts along and west of the Continental Divide, which we are right west of the Continental Divide. So, okay, fine fuel conditions. We still have some carryover from 2017. You know, if you've been out in the woods at all, you know that there's a lot of grass out there. You know, there's areas of high summer and fall soil moisture, and winter and early spring expected warmth is likely to contribute to some spring green-up, which is going to also increase the amount of fine fuels out there. And it doesn't take long for those, you know, we'll get a short period of green-up, and then it doesn't take long for those fuels to cure out. And so they would be available to burn as we progress into fire season. You know, highlighted in green right there, a good carryover of fine fuels, plus the additional spring growth equals significant amount of fine fuels to potentially carry fire. And, you know, down in the lower country, in the pinon juniper and lower elevations, we get more fine fuels than we do up higher in the timber. So, so basically normal to above normal for the fine fuel factor there. Okay, so mid-November through mid-February, temperature and precipitation, I think we all know what that looked like. You know, mild with below normal, mild temperatures with below normal precipitation. Snowpack is way below normal. It's probably better in the northern part of the region, but here in the southern part of the region, it's you know, we have 0 to none for snowpack. It's not looking very good for snowpack. Okay, so looking at February, overall warm and dry. We did see a little bit more precipitation, so this is a little bit behind. Chuck Maxwell, who puts this together, put this out last month, so a little bit behind. We did see some moisture for probably a good 3-week period in there, which, you know, it basically delayed the onset of fire season. It didn't really do much, and probably promoted a little bit more of that, will promote some more of that fine fuel growth. So that's basically what that moisture did to us. Don't let it fool you. Let's see, the Great Flood of February, that's what he's calling it. 2 to 4 inches of rain. Yeah. Yep. We did see varying amounts of precip across the forest. We saw higher amounts here in the southern part of the forest, up towards Beaverhead and further north. There was lesser amounts, but you know, the rain was widespread, but the amounts differed. So, okay, so energy release component is a trend that we track to help us determine where we're at in fire season. And I won't get into that too much. And this is sort of the weather patterns that they're predicting for February through May. So as you can see, you know, we're looking at warmer and drier trend with the jet stream kind of cutting through the middle of the U.S. there, and basically it's not looking like we're going to get a lot of precip this spring, and temperatures are probably going to be a little bit above normal. So, and it looks like basically we're moving away from La Nina by mid to late spring, and then at that point, you know, if we get into a neutral between El Nino and La Nina, we're basically, weather becomes harder to predict, and you know, they just don't have a good way of predicting exactly how much. It's neutral conditions, and so it could swing either way. You know, wetter, drier, warmer, cooler. Yeah, it's not very predictable when we're in neutral conditions. Okay, so this is a potential alternate pattern, which is not very likely, but they like to provide that to us, which could indicate that we may be cooler, and may have the potential to have a little bit more moisture. which is an alternate. It's not the primary. Okay, monsoon, this really doesn't change for us. We typically see our monsoon around the beginning of July, anywhere between the 4th and the 10th, somewhere in there. And not seeing much difference in that for this season. So when you put all those factors together, drought, we're potential for us to move more into drought conditions. We definitely have an abundance of fine fuels. Our seasonal temperature and precip, very dry, mild winter, potential to maybe get some more spring moisture, not very likely though. And then the spring and early summer weather pattern being variable because we're changing from El Nino to La Nina. And then monsoon probably going to be on time and normal. So what does that all mean? Well, for us here on the Gila, I think we have the potential to have an active fire season in May and June. A good indicator a good way that we track what's happening is based on our prescribed burning efforts. So we typically burn anywhere between 5,000 and 20,000 acres each spring across the Gila National Forest. And to be able to do so, we have to have the right window of opportunity. So meaning that all the factors have to be correct. So we're looking at temperatures, winds, relative humidity, fuel moistures, both dead and live, and so all those conditions have to be within the right parameters, or else we don't achieve the conditions that we want to out there with our prescribed burn. And so what we're trying to do with our prescribed burning program is we're trying to, number one, we're trying to burn some of the fuels that are on the ground, that woody debris that's out there, the pine cones, the branches, the logs. We're trying to reduce some of that, to reduce the potential impact of an unwanted wildfire, and also to promote growth of new forbs and grasses basically for wildlife and improve the forage for them. So those are some of the benefits that we get out of that, and like I said earlier, conditions have to be right for us to achieve those desired results. So we track those conditions very closely. Right now we're looking at trying to burn, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Beaverhead, but we're trying to implement some prescribed burns surrounding Beaverhead to the tune of about 20,000 acres. So we have a large prescribed burn, several units up there that we're trying to get burned this year, and we're looking for those opportunities. We were on track to fall into that prescription this month, up until we started getting the rain. We were looking at burning that beginning in March. And so with the recent rains, we're definitely set back. If we tried to burn right now, it's too wet out there and we would not achieve the results that we're after. And so right now we're looking at May, or April, sorry.
Is that north or south of Beaverhead?
It would be the Indian Peaks area, so north of Beaverhead, yeah. So we have, we're still not there. I mean, we're tracking those fuel moistures up there, both the dead and live, and we're not even close to being in prescription. And so that I think that sort of gives you an idea of where we're at in fire season. If we can't get it to burn out there with drip torches, QZs, the helicopter dropping the ping pong balls, we can't even get it to burn right now, based on the conditions that we're seeing out there. And so we're still a month behind, and that gives you a good idea. We typically try to burn on the shoulder seasons, not during fire season, but just prior to fire season, when conditions are starting to trend upwards, is typically when we try to do our prescribed burning. And so we're just not there yet. We're going to get there. Unless something crazy happens this spring and we start getting more moisture and cooler temperatures, we're definitely trending back towards warmer and drier, and we're going to meet those conditions again. And I think we'll get there. We'll have a short window of opportunity to do our prescribed burning, and then we'll be right into fire season. So I don't know if, people keep track of human caused starts. We keep track of human caused starts. We keep track of lightning caused fires, and we have definitely seen a decrease in the amount of lightning caused fires here on the Gila National Forest. Our 10-year average has decreased from probably over 250 fires a year and dipped down as low as maybe 20 lightning caused fires. On average, I would say we're probably trending down to maybe 40 to 50 lightning caused fires per year. Human caused fires, we typically do not see a problem with human caused fires on the forest. We have a prevention program, and we try to get the word out there, to be careful with fire, and basically that message that we put out to the general public, just practice good campfire etiquette, basically, and I think it's effective. And so the whole, I guess what I'm getting at here is that we've seen a decrease in the actual number of starts across the forest per year. We don't have a problem with human-caused fires. So the variable that is unknown is, the spring storms that come in May, the thunderstorms that come and drop lightning, and then as we progress into the monsoon season, prior to things getting really wet, we start seeing moisture come up, and basically that moisture just produces dry thunderstorms. We'll see what the season brings. I mean, it's all dependent on, spring storms in May, and then, as we progress into the monsoons, how much lightning we get is basically what we're looking at. I do believe we have the potential to be very active if we do get the lightning, because we are trending towards warmer and drier conditions. This little round of rain that we got basically delayed us for a couple of weeks, and then we'll start trending back upward again. We are trending upward again right now, so we have the potential to be busy this spring. With that, we're preparing for fire season. We have several meetings planned with our cooperators. We typically try to reach out to the 4 counties that on the National Forest. We have a meeting with Catron County on March 26th. And kind of the substance of that meeting is basically to bring all the cooperators to the table, including county fire departments, VFDs. The state usually participates with that. We also have cooperators such as power line companies like Navapache will show up to Catron County. So it's a cooperator meeting to basically bring everybody to the table and discuss concerns that they might have with the upcoming fire season. It gives us, the Forest Service, the state, the county, an opportunity to provide information on what resources they have available as far as engines and, for us, hand crews, hot shot crews, that kind of thing. Basically just get everybody to the table and talk about the potential for the fire season. The other thing we like to do at those meetings is have a representative from the National Weather Service out of Santa Teresa. Tom Bird usually comes down and provides an outlook for us. It's more of a shorter term outlook. What I provided you is kind of based on climatology. What Tom Bird does in the National Weather Service is more real time and provides a better snapshot of what's actually happening in a particular location. So we like to do that at those meetings as well. We've had, Randy and I have worked together in the past, and we've had a Grant County meeting. I'd like to definitely work with him again and continue that effort. We also meet with Sierra County and their CWPP group and go over the same type of information. The other thing we're doing is we're working on we have internal meetings. We call them landscape risk assessments. We basically pull the maps out with each district, look at areas that we may have concerns on the forest, areas that we may have opportunity to actually use fire to manage the landscape. Fire is a very effective tool at managing the landscape. So we're in the process of having those internal meetings as well. And we're also doing things like our annual fire refreshers and our just basically preseason firework to get everybody thinking about fire season again and being prepared for it. So as far as resources go, engines and hand crews, we basically have our normal contingent of resources available to us, which is nine engines spread across the forest. We have 4 10-person hand crews. We have 2 interagency hotshot crews, one in Silver and one up at the Negrito Fire Base just outside of Reserve. We do plan on bringing 20 smoke jumpers down and their aircraft right around May 15th. And tankers, air tankers aren't sort of a different scenario than what it used to be, 15 years ago. We don't have one stationed here per se, but we do, we can get one as needed based on the conditions and pre-position them here down at the airport. We do have 2 helicopters on contract. We have a light helicopter, which is mainly used to deliver cargo and to initial attack small fires. They can get into real tight spots out on the forest. So we do have that on contract, and then we have a Type 1 helicopter, which is a large sky crane. It has the capacity, it has the capability of delivering a couple thousand gallons of water in a single shot to respond to a fire out there. And so we have both those resources available, and then our dispatch center's up and running, and we're basically prepared. We have our hotshot crew, Silver City Hotshots. They pack tested yesterday and they're available as of today. So we have resources that are ready to go. Most of our engines are ready to go as well currently. So, any questions?
Thanks. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So, Gabe, do we still have the capability of refilling the retardant on the larger planes if we call one in?
Absolutely, yeah.
I didn't know if they had to fly back to Chuka or someplace else.
No, so that's a good point. We're sort of transitioning from the old generation aircraft, the P2Vs and the P3s, to a new generation, mostly jetted aircraft. And so it is, with those new aircraft, they do need longer runways or lower elevation airports to be able to take off with a full load. There's several of them, though, that we can still manage out of here, and those are the ones we typically request when we have a need. And if it gets really hot and the density altitude is way up there, then then in some cases we may have to download and not fill up those tanks completely. It's the same thing with our helicopters and our aircraft. Sometimes we can't take off from the airport because it's 120 degrees out there on the tarmac, and it's just too hot and dry, and density altitude is way up there, and so we have to download in some cases, but that's pretty rare. It usually happens to us like the 3rd and 4th week of June, where we have to, and it's not all the time. It's only those managers keep track of that. Pay attention to that before they take off, and so it's typically for several hours during the day and not for the entire day.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Holguin, if they didn't come out of here, if we didn't come out here, where would they come out of?
There's several tanker bases surrounding us. The very large air tankers, like the DC-10 and this 737, those come out of either Phoenix, Gateway, or Roswell. So those are the 2, or Albuquerque. Those are the 3 bases they can operate out of because they're long. Runways are long and they're made for commercial airplanes. And so that's typically where they would come out of, and the turnaround time is very short. Those aircraft move very fast, Our lead planes can't even keep up with those aircraft because our lead planes are typically prop airplanes, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Mr. Ogie?
Thank you for your...
Actually, I'd like to say something, Mr. Chairman, sorry about that. I just want to publicly congratulate you on your son's state championship.
Thank you.
I know that's completely off, but congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dick. Appreciate that, Mr. Romo.
Any other questions? Thanks for being here today, appreciate it. Thanks for the report.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Moving on to the next agenda item, we have with us Tracy Bernstead from the Assessor's Office to talk about options for the parcel map correction. Welcome.
No, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, I got it.
Yep, you're on. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning. I'm Tracy Bernstead, and just in case you're not familiar with what I do, the core duties of my employment with the county are to process deeds and adjust the parcel map to keep an accurate ownership record for property valuation. I'm going to be honest, you're about to get way more information about the parcel map than you really ever would want, but it's important to know how big a parcel map correction project is to decide on whether to fund a correction. So on the right, you can see the parcel map, the 47,000 plus tracts that make up the land of our county. And when assisting customers in the assessor's office, we look at the parcel map overlaid on aerial imagery daily. In many areas, the aerial can vary from the parcel boundaries by hundreds of feet. This causes citizens to become alarmed that they're encroaching on their neighbor's property or their neighbor's encroaching on their property. Title companies and surveyors get calls all the time about how the assessor parcel map shows them that my property boundary is not where it should be. And you may even get calls from your constituents about it. I know Alicia has had a call at least about using a parcel map as a survey. Even county employees trying to get an idea where water lines might be or where property lines of volunteer fire departments throughout the county are, use the parcel map and may not really have an accurate idea. So this confusion can cost the county and citizens a lot of money and undue clarification with surveying or resurveying or title company or attorney fees. So in this confusion, citizens and county employees often ask why I can't just shift the boundary lines of the parcels and fix the parcel map. There's a lot more to it than that, and I'll address that with my presentation. It helps to think of the map as one big puzzle, though. If you change the shape of one parcel, you change the shape of the surrounding parcels. And you would be adding to or taking away from the neighboring property, and most property owners would not be very happy with this idea. And the assessor's office cannot arbitrarily change the boundary lines either. It has to be based on legal documentation. So in this presentation, I'm going to explain what the parcel record is, explain the data limitations and error, and present options and recommendations for increasing the accuracy of the data, and in turn, increase public confidence in the county and save lost county and citizen time and money. So beginning in 1976, the assessor's office began keeping property records in a map format on Mylar sheets. This purpose was largely to prevent double assessment of property, assessing the same piece of land to two people, and by verifying the property boundaries. I draw out every bearing and direction from a legal description, like the one shown on the right, on every deed to verify the boundaries. Recording a survey does not transfer ownership and therefore doesn't change the assessor record or the parcel map. So the goal of this record has always been to provide taxpayers with fair and equitable property assessments based on the area of land. The parcel map is for ad valorem tax purposes only, and the information is shared as a courtesy. This is important to note because it's the data user's responsibility to be aware of the error and the danger in using data for other than what it was intended. So in my day-to-day work, differences arise daily between the parcel map and the legal descriptions of the document. When the parcel boundary data is used with other data sets, discrepancies increase even further, and error must be accounted for on the other data as well. So these discrepancies have many forms and may have many sources. The above example is one that I've been revisiting often lately as the DOT acquires right-of-way along PA Road for the widening and sidewalk project. On the left is an example of the parcels mapped as standalone boundaries. This is what I work with most of the time. On the right, when you add the aerial imagery data and the road centerline data, the discrepancies become very apparent. Parcel lines are shifted about 120 feet to the southeast. And then I have to determine which data set has the error, the parcels, the center lines, or the aerial imagery. I know in this case that it's the parcels and the rendering of that subdivision, but which data set has the error is not always readily apparent. So because the map is public information and made available to the public, and most users don't really understand the limitations of the data, even if I tell them, it's important to the county in terms of data integrity and important to the citizens we serve to provide the most accurate data possible. So here are the data issues that I'll be talking about in the next slides. Parcels made to fit based on chain of title, surveyor differences, Scrivener error, Mylar drafting errors, and Mylar digitization error, public land survey system section corner discrepancies, and ortho imagery error in mountainous areas. So at its most basic, the parcel boundary is based on a surveyed area of land that is written into a legal description that's transcribed onto a conveyance document to transfer ownership. One issue is that there are discrepancies between surveys and surveyors based on control points or the ties to a location on Earth, and their differing measurements. Historically, surveyors were not required to reference surrounding parcels' legal descriptions, and these differences lead to property line disputes as seen in the above original mineral surveys and resulting overlap. Because of the issue of double assessment, these differences have to be resolved in our office, but because many of the differences are historical, assessed parcels are drawn based on the chain of title. So the person who came first has title, and later parcels are subordinate to earlier parcels because the first legal description prevails until corrected or adjusted by a surveyor. In this way, many of the secondary parcels are mapped and made to fit and do not represent the legal description on the deed. So the example on the left, it's kind of hard to see, shows the difference in the blue parcel, that's the parcel record, as compared to the survey boundary lines of the property. It's a parcel that was made to fit. And the example on the right is how differences between surveys can date back to the original patent of land, in this case from 1879 and 1914. When parcels are never resurveyed, the legal description is copied and pasted onto subsequent transfer documents. So this discrepancy is indicated by the red arrow up there. You can see the little sliver, was recently resolved last year, all the way from 1914. On the left is another example of surveyor differences where you can see small slivers below the parcel highlighted in blue. This parcel was adjusted and deeded, but then another surveyor surveyed it 10 years later and said it had been erroneously adjusted and adjusted it back. And then on the right is an example of error introduced when creating the transfer document. The scrivener or writer creates an error in the legal description, such as leaving out a call or boundary line segment or switching a bearing direction, which affects how the parcel is drawn. So these are the discrepancies and errors in the raw data. That's the sole information that the parcels map is drawn from. But then there are also errors created in the process of transcribing the raw data from documents into the parcel map. So county record error occurred when drafting the original property boundary record on Mylars, with slight shifts of lines and even the line thickness. So then when New Mexico Property Tax Division required digitization of the record, the county fulfilled the requirement in a very basic way. Drafting errors were transferred, Then error was also introduced in transferring a flat paper record to a curved digital projection, like how an orange peel cannot be made to be flat. And the result was increasing error from west to east, with the biggest discrepancy in the mimbres, as you can see on the right, with an offset of up to 350 feet. So although there's also error even within individual sections, because the sections were drawn out individually, and the edges being more distorted than the center because of the projection. So the record's also subject to error from an outside data source that it's dependent upon for the tie to the land. The BLM keeps the record of the original public land survey system platted surveys. These are the sections, township and range, government lots, and mineral surveys that were the original system for legal description. Because most deeds reference this system for points of beginning or tied to a point on the earth, the assessor record is dependent on the BLM's data. This data has been minimally corrected and presents major discrepancies. So it's off by varying degrees throughout the county. Legal descriptions reference section corners, as you've probably heard people reference township, range, and section, and you may have noticed it from your own deed. Or they reference a subdivision plat, such as Lot 9, Block 6 of Indian Hills, plat of survey recorded in the clerk's office, that's tied to the section corners. So each survey that's recorded ties to those. In the above case, the starting point for a legal description is the west quarter corner of a section. The data from the BLM is off from the survey quarter corner by 100 feet to the west. So you can imagine how parcels will not fit together in the map and will overlap if the ties are different depending on the particular section corner used and how far off that data is. To a much lesser degree, there's also error in rectifying or placing aerial imagery on a map. In mountain areas, when images are stitched together based on the angle of the the distortion can occur from the base of the steep terrain to the top, as you can see with the red arrow. Although aerial imagery is not the basis for the parcel record, this must also be kept in mind when evaluating where discrepancies lie or looking at some of the options for correction. In a given area, the aerial imagery may be off as opposed to the other data. So to sum up, these are the various mapping errors, not including title errors, that I evaluate every day, and for over 3,000 accounts and 2,300 documents that I process each year to determine that our assessor property ownership record is correct. These discrepancies are the reason that there is a disclaimer about the use of our parcel data when it's being shared. Unfortunately, many people do not pay much attention to disclaimers, but as you can see in this case, the data absolutely should only be used to get a general idea of ownership and property location. Members of the public and employees of the county become frustrated when they don't want to pay to have a parcel surveyed, and the assessor parcel data can't serve a survey's purpose, though. But because of the inherent errors in the process, the parcel map will never serve the purpose of a survey. So even though it will never be survey quality, accuracy of the data could increase. And there are 4 options that we came up with for doing that. Charlene, Misha, and Daniel started the process, and we've kind of worked through a little more since then. But first we have to decide whether or not we want the map just to look good for other data users, or whether we'd like the data to be fundamentally accurate. So it makes a difference when deciding between the options. Looking good is good for sharing data, but does not really address the underlying issues. So we have 4 options. We looked at contracting out a spatial adjustment, contracting for the spatial adjustment, and then including a parcel fabric to correct it utilizing county employees, or to hire a parcel map correction employee. So option 1 is contracting with an outside firm to do a spatial adjustment of boundary lines, or just shifting the boundary lines. This is of limited use to the assessor property record and could actually introduce more error, as seen on the next slide. So a contractor would do a spatial adjustment that would shift parcel lines to aerial imagery based on occupation boundaries and based on adjustment of section corners. There's a danger in shifting to occupation because of the many encroachments or neighbors not knowing where property lines are and building on neighboring property. It can introduce more error by shifting parcels in the wrong direction. So on the left, Go back. On the left, there's the Grant County record before. It's kind of shifted off to the west. In the middle is if you adjusted it to occupation, there's it's hard to see on there, but there's a fence line on the south side, and then there's a shed up in the northeast corner. So if you included that shed, you'd actually be adjusting it off because the shed's encroaching on the neighboring property, because they did a boundary line adjustment. So the right hand is the correct one. So this adjustment would be mostly for data sharing and helping prevent some confusion among the appraisers in our office when locating improvements. It does not increase the ability of the county to correct the map going forward. The skill set of the county employees is not increased because it's contracted out. It only addresses errors spatially, does not address parcels made to fit that need to be drawn, approximately 13,000, or about half. It's another partial correction and doesn't address accuracy long-term. As transfers continue to happen, the parcels will continue to be made to fit, introducing more error. No capacity of the existing employee to administer the contract. The current parcel mapper, myself, is doing title examining, parcel mapping, and appraiser data entry. That's a duty of at least a position and a half, and no other employee currently has the skills to administer the contract. The current parcels mapper would need to redraw and rectify discrepancies from adjustment, provide requested documents, and administer and monitor project progress. Existing duties would have to be modified and another employee hired and trained to relieve some appraiser duties before this could occur within the assessor's office. So this would be the quickest option at about 1 year of project implementation, but the least accurate. And there's a cost breakdown right here. It would be $93,800 to contract the spatial adjustment, and then $53,966 to hire an appraiser position in the assessor's office to allow for project implementation. That's with salary and benefits. Option 2 is nearly the same as option 1 with the spatial adjustment. It adds the conversion of the resulting data from the adjustment to a parcel fabric. A parcel fabric allows for boundaries to be more easily corrected going forward and addresses the issues with parcels being made to fit. The correction would be slow and integrated into the regular workflow of the parcel mapper. The rate would be $3,000 out of $26,422 per year, or about 11%. Which would take about 9 years, not accounting for multiple transfers of the same property or some transfers that occur less frequently, like once every 20 years. So there's no guarantee that the 13,000 parcels that are estimated in need of redrawing will transfer during the 9-year time period. And this option would also include hiring an appraiser position to allow for project implementation employee training. It does not address correcting control points, ties, georeferencing surveys for accurate parcel placement, or redrawing any deeds, and any major corrections would not be addressed. It's similar in accuracy to the next option, but addresses shapes of parcels long-term, but doesn't address map-wide scale corrections with section corners.
Tracy?
Yeah.
Could you explain the connection with the transfer of property? Because I didn't understand. I guess when I started listening to this option, I thought you could do this whether or not a property transferred.
Sure. So back to one of the discrepancies, the parcels are made to fit based on the chain of title.
Yeah.
And this parcel fabric option, once you have a parcel fabric, you can assign weights to a parcel based on whether or not you think it's based on a surveyed legal description. So you could assign a higher weight to it and adjust surrounding parcels instead of pulling all of the deeds for the surrounding parcels and then all of the deeds surrounding that parcel. And because in my normal workflow right now, that's impossible to do, to make any meaningful correction, but a parcel fabric addresses that. Does that make any sense?
I don't know if I'm slow. So, again, connect that to transfer of property. Where does the transfer of property come into that issue? I think I understand the difficulty of the puzzle that you've described. But
Sure. So The transfer of property with a parcel fabric, when a deed comes through and I'm verifying the property boundaries, then I would be able to adjust the parcels on a meaningful basis with the parcel fabric as I'm going through my regular workflow at the time of transfer instead of,
And you couldn't just pretend that the same thing happened, so you accomplish the same thing and get it done in 9 years?
well, if I had the time to do 13,000 parcels all at once.
Well, so no, okay, so now we're coming to something I can understand. You had indicated that maybe you could do this at a rate of 11% of the currently strange 13,000 parcels, right? That would take you 9 years.
Right,
But then you said, but it would depend on them being transferred.
right.
If you can do it in 9 years, can't you do it in 9 years whether they're transferred or not?
Well, if it's happening at the time of the transfer, like I don't have any additional
I
time,
see.
free time at the moment to do extra parcels.
I see, okay, all right, thank you.
So whoever we hire to get this done, do they have to be licensed by the state of New Mexico in order to move our property line? Because our surveyors are licensed and bonded to do that job. So if we hire somebody to do this, can they actually move a property line?
As long as we're not using it as a survey, because in the end, like I had said before, we're never going to be able to use
So
it
then
as
if
a
we're just
survey.
using it for tax purposes, why would we want to spend this kind of money?
So that we don't have parcels that are 350 feet off in the Mimbres or...
But, I mean, it's just used for tax purposes. So if you make your adjustment, because we've been doing this for many, many years. I remember 20 years ago, we wanted to hire, or we wanted to get permanent survey stakes, and I don't know if that's been done since then, but,
No.
I mean, it's something that probably needs to be taken into consideration throughout the whole state, because everybody has the same problem.
Yes, and many of the other counties have already gone through this process, and toward the end of my presentation,
Perfect.
we're one of the last counties to correct our data spatially.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so where was I?
13,000 parcels or
Oh, yes. So this option would also include hiring an appraiser position in the assessor's office to allow for the project implementation. The cost breakdown for that, so if you can go into that. So this is the same as option 2 as far as the cost, except it adds in the parcel fabric conversion by a contractor. And we initially looked at whether or not we could do this ourselves, but it's nearly impossible. Every other county contracts it out. So that would be a kind of a set figure to add in the $26,200. The third option is a more comprehensive correction utilizing existing county employees, myself, and the Planning and Mapping Department's mapping technician. So this depends on the current workload and whether this can be shifted and employees can be trained. This option at 6 years would not take as long as the contract parcel fabric option, but would take longer than hiring a dedicated employee. It would be subject to current duties and changing workloads. Mapping ability could be retained within the county, and staff could better respond to future projects and requests. It does not address the parcels made to fit based on chain of title long-term with the parcel fabric, but it addresses Mylar drafting errors and digitization error. It does not address the surveyor differences. It addresses public land survey system section corners by georeferencing surveys and requesting shapefile data with surveyors for accurate adjustment. It's similar in accuracy to option 2. It addresses section corners in a more robust correction, but does not address the parcels made to fit long-term. So the cost breakdown for this, it'd be $330,216 for 6 years because of the hiring the appraiser position to allow for participating in training, focusing duties, and more on the parcels mapping, and also $6,420 for 2 people to go to an off-site training as retraining, and also commitment of the planning department mapping employee for half a day for 6 years. So it comes out to about $55,000 per year for 6 years. Half a day a day. Every day. Option 4. Option 4 is to hire a parcel map correction employee. This person could be hired on either a permanent or a project basis to ensure project completion. A qualified individual could be hired that would ensure project success and minimize training costs. This option would allow for the highest accuracy because of the available time to GPS section corners and work with surveyors on a county-wide control point system to address point of beginning discrepancies. Mapping ability could be retained within the county or community, and staff could better respond to future projects and requests. A full correction to have a parcel map that's correct in size, shape, and position, including corrections for curvature, is important to myself and the assessor's office as the keeper of the property record for data integrity and to strive for a higher standard as a best practice. Parcels would be as accurate as we could possibly get them. It would comprehensively address the record discrepancies within the county's sphere of influence. So it addresses parcels made to fit based on the chain of title, with redrawing the parcels and then also integrating the parcel fabric, so a current and a fixed going forward. It addresses the surveyor differences with the system of control points. It completely addresses Mylar drafting errors and Mylar digitization error, and addresses public land survey system section corners by georeferencing surveys and then the shapefile data with surveyors. So this option is the most accurate, and it breaks down to hiring a mapping employee in the assessor's office or contracting a local mapping professional for 4 years. And I put the salary in here based on our salary study that was done. And if it was an outside mapping professional, it might be slightly different. And then there's the $26,200 with the parcel fabric conversion. $3,000 is a rough estimate if we were to contract with surveyors for that control point system. And then the $53,966 to hire an appraiser for 1 year to address the staffing in the assessor's office, just to communicate with that mapping professional and work with them. So my personal recommendation is to hire another parcel correction employee. It saves the parcel mapper time over decades and increases productivity. Just 5 minutes of my explanation a day adds up to almost 2.5 days per year explaining, and that's just in my position. It's a comprehensive fix that addresses all the error and limits or eliminates future fixes. It increases our capacity to address other data challenges in the future. For example, with accurate parcels, you can have accurate addressing ranges and faster emergency response times if they were to use our data. And the parcels are kind of base data for more advanced data analysis. The Town of Silver City Police Department calls me every once in a while to verify a crime location, whether or not it's in or out of town. And my answer is, I'm fairly sure it's in or out, when they and I really need to be sure. It reduces costs related to confusion caused by the parcel map, and it creates more confidence in the county record and county government in general. So when the parcel map was first created, I'm sure the potential for what it could become and how it could be used was never envisioned. Then when it was digitized, the funding and technology was not there to create an accurate data set. Since then, its potential and shortcomings have been seen over and over again. It's really time to have a full correction and bring our data up to industry standards, and the best way to do that is to commit to hiring a person dedicated solely to the correction. As you've seen, what a huge project it is. Once it's corrected with something other than a minimal fix, the data will be reliable moving forward and more useful for all stakeholders that rely upon the county for comprehensive property transfer information. We're one of the last counties in the state to do something about our data. Hidalgo County has recently had theirs done, and it's something that's been needed for a long time. It's just been put off because of the cost and how it's not an easy fix, but it's time to start addressing it. And I believe The assessor, Raul, is looking to submit one of these options as a budget item in June. So, thank you for your time. Does anyone have any more questions?
I just want to say,
Good, you took some good time to put this presentation together. We thank you very much. But how do we tie, say that we were to try and push getting survey spots in town, would that correct this?
The survey control points?
Yes,
That addresses the tie to the land, so kind of the basis of where every parcel is. So that's one of the errors, level of discrepancy that we have. So that would really help going forward, and then adjusting our existing data to those. But it's so huge, there's 13,000 parcels, that there's just not the capacity, employee time currently to do that.
Now, if there's an adjustment made and say there's some litigation, is the county going to be held responsible, being that we're not licensed to survey?
No, because, again, we're only sharing the information as a courtesy, and we put that disclaimer on there that there's, it's never to be used as a survey.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, and I'm no doubt jumping the gun a little bit here, but this project feels to me, it has the nature of a capital investment. It's something that the benefits accrue over decades.
Yes.
And the cost is incurred up front. Is this something, I know we have, I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, I know we're about to have a presentation about GO bonds, but is this something, if we hired contractors instead of employees to do this, that could be funded through bonding? Because of that capital nature of the investment?
I don't know that it can necessarily be done through bonding, but the idea with what Mark is going to present to you is it's going to free up some money to do some other things and give us some more flexibility moving forward.
In other counties, has this been done with bonding, do we know, or has it all been done with operational funding?
You can do whatever you want with bonding as long as you state the purpose, but it's the counties that I'm aware of and the county I came from, we phased the project and we paid for it out of operational funding because we looked at it from the exact same perspective you just said. This is an investment moving forward, and it needs to be done for fundamental accuracy.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, so when you talk about a capital outlay, are you looking at it as though it's not reoccurring funding? Is that why you're saying it that way?
That's correct.
And I don't think I see that from the assessor as thinking it's not reoccurring funding, because every position, every proposal had an employee attached to it.
For various lengths of time.
Yeah.
Right, and the longest,
You know
was 6 years.
government as well as I do. Once you get one, you're not going to get rid of them.
So, another piece of my question was, if you did it with a contract, as opposed to a staff, and that addresses your concern.
And I think that, however, once again, I'll restate, every proposal had an employee that came with it. But yes, if you could do it 100% with a contractor, I think you could probably use bonded funding for that.
Okay. I think we're understanding each other.
Yeah.
Mr. Turrieta, what advantages do you see? What advantages do you see by hiring someone versus a contractor, and disadvantages with it?
One of the major
issue is actually maintaining the parcels. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, I've had nightmares for decades about this because 17 years ago when we actually did the rubber sheeting with the Mylars, it was just amazing how off they are. And we do have a lot of issues, not only through the realtors, but also the title companies, surveyors, because it is off by quite a few feet. But the benefit is that we can actually maintain the accuracy of this data.
Okay, but what's the advantages of hiring somebody within and going contractor?
Hiring within is you can actually train them, and you will have them in the office, and like I said, keeping the maintenance of the data itself.
Any other questions?
Well, I might just add my perception of your answer. The maintenance, we're not increasing the number of parcels, and presumably we're not increasing the number of transactions. So I would think once the adjustment is made, the maintenance would be either equal to what we do now, or maybe even less, due to the fact that there are fewer errors. So in my mind, I distinguish between the one-time cost of doing the work and the ongoing cost of maintenance, which we're already covering. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, and depending on the option, like the parcel fabric option, it'd be minimal to correct going forward if there's any more accurate surveys and legal descriptions are updated.
Yeah.
So
And option 4 involved an employee for how many years?
for 4 years.
That was 4 years?
4 years.
So about 90,000, 85,000 or so per year. And then after 4 years, just to address Commissioner Caston's concern, what would you foresee happening with that employee? Either of you?
I'm not familiar as far as the hiring practices as much. I've mostly title examining and parcel mapping, but it could either be integrated into another position, maybe changed, or maybe it could be like a temporary hire, like a 4-year hire.
It all depends, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown, we just want this thing fixed, okay? It's been like this I've been there for the last 30-some odd years, and it has been a nightmare due to the fact that it's just so off. And thanks to our county manager, I guess they did it in-house there in Roosevelt County. And a lot of the counties have actually been fixed. And like I said, once again, we're probably the last county to actually fix our data. Hidalgo County just actually had it contracted out. But once again, like the way Trace was, you can make it look good, but you're not having clean data. And it would depend probably with the commission what you would want to do on the hire.
So thinking longer term, and also thinking over the past year, you've requested a position for a different purpose. Would it work to think of this position as serving one purpose for 4 years and serving that other purpose for another indefinite?
That is correct, yes, it would work.
And I don't know if that's what's in your head, it's now what's in my head, as a supporter of that position existing.
Yes.
So I'm putting my cards up, and I'm thinking, I was kind of thinking the way you were, but the person that you requested before wasn't costing us $96,000 per year. So I think that's where we need to look at the adjustment. Correct.
Well, throughout the years, it's been an error, so it hasn't really cost us anything, to be honest with you. However, we're actually, we're limited in our office to begin with. One position is frozen, where it has brought us back over 6 months, and that's doing our sales. So that's also frozen. But it would really benefit the assessor's office, not only about fixing the parcel mapping, but also bringing in revenue for the county and reoccurring revenue with more employees.
And I don't think we're trying to say we're against it. I think we just need to figure out what it's really going to cost. We need real numbers. And 96,000, that's making a little more than you do there, Mr.
I have some options.
Yeah, salary plus benefits, but even at the regular salary, that's a good chunk of change.
I will send you the copy of the full
Presentation, look over it. If you have any questions, you can sit with us, Tracy, myself, my chief deputy, and my chief appraiser, Missy, because we've really worked very diligently about this. But the bottom line is, I think we owe it to the taxpayers, the property owners, to have clean data on their property, because that's their most important investment, is their property itself. So I think we owe it to them.
So you said a minute ago that having this position would increase revenue. Explain how to do that.
For the simple reason that we can actually have these people not only work in sales, increasing whatever the property is being comped out. Not only that, we can actually use them and utilize them out in the field to pick up value. We haven't had a reappraisal in quite a few years due to the fact that we're just keeping the assessor's office afloat. And the more valuation to bring in, the more revenue we're going to bring in. We talked about with the valuation maintenance and the net new, and we can actually prove that we could bring in more revenue.
So how much time would this person spend doing that, and how much time would they spend correcting the map? Like, based on your presentation, it sounded like the position was full-time in correcting the parcel map, but what you just said just now is they could do multiple things.
Well, they would
So
do-
how much time would they spend correcting the parcel map, and how much time would they spend doing everything else?
For the 4-year specific parcel map correction, it would be just parcel
The
map.
revenue-producing piece would come after that 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman? Yes. So I just want to make my point clear that the treasurer's name tag fell off his desk. No, under this situation, yes, I think it would have to be reoccurring funding that would have to pay for that, not some type of bonded issue that was going to end where you all of a sudden have
No, I agree.
a shut door and have to figure out how to fund it.
I see two different
That's
roads.
all I was talking about.
I agree.
Any other questions then?
Well, let me just throw one idea out. It's not totally a question, probably can't be answered, but this county does employ 2 mappers at the moment, correct? One in your department and one in planning? And is there any way we can combine those forces to do some of this work?
Yes, that was the option 3, so
Oh.
planning and mapping.
I knew I slept through option 3.
That would be partly me for a half day and Daniel working together.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to clarify.
Is that right?
And Commissioner Brown, that, yes, we do have one position that's frozen, and that's strictly for sales. This is a whole different position that we're looking at. And it would do quite multiple job duties, and it would actually bring in revenue for the county.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you for your time, appreciate that presentation.
Thank you.
Good job, Tracy.
Moving on to the next agenda item, 7, geodebt and geo-election for future projects. We have with us Mr. Valenzuela, Mark Valenzuela, and would you introduce who's with you, and welcome to Grant County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My associate is Lale Dayani. She'll be setting up this. May I have the permission to pass out a hard copy of the presentation?
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as we're getting the presentation for the public, I'd love to take a shot at the question that was asked earlier. And so this is, what we would like to do is have your bond attorneys look at the question. If this commission chose to move forward with a general obligation bond election, and then if the voters were supportive of that, could the money be used for this project? Generally, for tax-exempt bond proceeds, there's a useful life question. And so the IRS requires a useful life of anything purchased with bond proceeds to have a life of greater than 3 years. So bond attorneys have gotten pretty comfortable in terms of, new computer systems and data systems now to meet that 3-year threshold. So I suspect that the equipment side of the request could be covered with the bond proceeds. The actual staff time, however, likely would not meet the test. Just to be more clear about that.
It doesn't look like we have the right cord for this.
Oh, okay. So,
And I don't have one. Oh, is there one coming? Okay.
and I'll apologize to the public now for not being able to see this presentation. So, Mr. Chairman, at your pleasure, I'm happy to take you through this presentation. if you're okay with that, while we're still trying to move this forward. So, for the record, my name is Mark Valenzuela. I work with Hilltop Securities. I have changed firms recently. Formerly, you used to hear me say George K. Baum and Company, but I've changed to Hilltop. On slide 2 of the presentation, and thank you for this. Anytime I get a chance to provide, overview of Hilltop, I always am thankful and grateful for that. On slide 2, you can see Hilltop and their presence around the company. They are a public finance investment bank, very similar to the former firm that I was with, but they have greater resources. They also own Plains Capital Bank, which is one of the larger banks in Texas. They are the leading financial advisor to local governments across the country. So Hilltop does have quite a presence in every state, despite the fact that they don't have an office in every state. So my joining them we now have a presence here in New Mexico. They have been part of New Mexico Public Finance for several years. On slide 3 is just, again, sort of a little overview of who they are and their longevity in the business. Slide 4 are some of the expert areas that not only I have, but also other individuals within the firm have. And just a quick point, last year, this commission looked to hire an advisor for your hospital, and that was not a skill set that my prior firm had. Hilltop does have that. So, in the future, if there's anything that we could ever be helpful with, that is an area that we do have expertise. In fact, one of my colleagues represents University Medical Center in El Paso, and has other hospital clients here in the area. So, just as a point of information. Now, Mr. Chairman, for the purpose that I'm here for is, if I can direct you to slide 6, it's just to talk about general obligation bonds and what some of the statutory requirements are here in New Mexico, and then also what some of the opportunities for this commission would be. In New Mexico, the state constitution requires that any bonds or any debt that are issued and payable from property tax have to be approved by voters. And a further limitation on that is that counties can only issue up to 4% maximum of your assessed valuation. And I'll take you through those calculations shortly. And it's based on, first, the market valuation of property tax within the county. And as you know, in New Mexico, we multiply that by 33% to get to the assessed value. So it's not full taxation on the full amount like we see in Texas as an example. So the types of projects, counties are much more limited than other local governments like municipalities in terms of what they can issue general obligation bonds for, but you still have a pretty broad umbrella in terms of issuing those bonds relative to the mission and the charge of the county commission and the county administration. So things like your courthouse, hospital, airport, any landfills that are controlled and managed by the county, public roads and bridges, which of course is a big area for counties. If you owned or thought to own a water or wastewater system, that would be an opportunity as well. And then open space. One of the bigger issues for counties would be to acquire real estate for the purpose of open space, and then, of course, libraries. So those are the general broad categories that you have. I think the restrictions, you might ask, would be, what would restrictions be? Something like a sports stadium, that kind of project that there's not necessarily a direct correlation to the mission of the county commission. You would have to use some other mechanism of revenue that you have within the county for a project like that. So general obligation, property tax paid bonds have to be voter approved, have to fall within your 4% constitutional limitation against assessed value, and then have this express list of types of projects that you can use the proceeds for. On the left-hand side there, I've provided looks like we may get this. I provided you the calculation on the 4% assessed, the capacity. So in FY17, the assessed value in Grant County was $847 million. Multiply that times 4%, and your capacity here within the county is $33 million, almost $34 million. Now, what the state requires is that you deduct out any existing debt that are on the books that are paid for with property tax only. So this would not include your gross receipts tax debt or any other kind of debt that you might have, only debt related to property tax. And so currently you have one bond currently outstanding, and the amount of principal that's left to be repaid on that is $2.3 million. So deducting that out, your current capacity, if you chose to go forward with a bond election, you could go up to $31.5 million. So that's how that calculation's made. It changes on an annual basis, so if you sought an election this year, your election could be $31.5 million. If you sought it in 2 years from now, that could obviously go up or down depending on the increase in assessed valuation. On the bottom chart there, just providing you the data more clearly, and breaking it out from residential and non-residential, and then also the value you get from copper. And it's a fairly good increase for the county. That's a positive credit factor, positive financial factor for this county. Moving on to slide 7, talking more about your existing debt. And this is the first issue that I wanted to really bring up. And Charlene has really led the conversation here. The last bond election was in 2005, and that election was for a question for the detention center for a bond issuance up to $10 million. That did pass. It had good support within the community, and this community has always been very supportive of bond issues for the county. And from that election, you sold a Series 2005 bonds, which have now been paid off. They paid off last year, and that amount was $6 million. And the current bonds that exist and are outstanding are the 2009 bonds, which was a $4 million bond issue. And again, the remaining principal on that is $2.3 million. One of the strategies that the county had for several years now was to, in the best effort, keep the mill levy, or the rate that residents pay for property tax at the same level that it has been in the past. Frequently what happens with communities is you have a good year and there's a lot of cash from property tax collected, and then the property tax drops to maybe half. I'm just for illustrative purposes saying half. And then the following year it has to go back up. So there tends to be this up and down. And so counties have gotten very smart about trying to manage that and keep it level the entire time. And so that's what's happened here with Grant County. And from that, and from your growth and the assessed value, which has been really strong, you've collected an additional $1.2 million, roughly. I mean, it's a little bit more than that. But you have some excess cash. So last year, Charlene and your finance officer and myself had a conversation with the state local government division about that excess cash. And the conversation was that local government division was going to recommend lowering the mill levy. And so the response back was, allow the county the ability to use that cash to pay off existing debt. And so that's what you see here on slide 7. So with that $1.2 million, let me just point you to the graph on the top right-hand page of the paper. That's a profile of your existing debt. And if you go to 2018, you can see that it went from, in 2016, almost $1 million a year payment, and now it's dropped down to about $410,000. So that's the opportunity there. We have this cash, and if you total up the last 3 payments, years 20, 21, 22, and 23, and I've listed those for you there at the bottom left-hand corner, that totals about $1.35 million. So the proposal I'm making to you, and I think if we don't do this, DFA is going to come in and probably lower your mill levy down to 0 if this doesn't happen. But the proposal I'm recommending is that you take your excess cash and pay off the last 3 years of the bonds. So in other words, you will shorten the life of that debt by 3 years. Now, while that happens, you now have this excess capacity. Your 4% opens up now because you've been making this $1 million payment every year. Now it's down to $400,000, and you're even paying off more on the long end and saving a little bit of money. So the thought is by paying off 3 years early, you seek a bond election. I'm now moving to slide 8. go to the bond, have a bond election for public projects. It's an opportunity to have more capital funding for capital projects, and pursue it from the voters. I've run numbers based on the assumption that you wouldn't use the full $31.5 million. You wouldn't go to the voters for that amount of debt, but rather some smaller manageable number, and in this case, the scenario shows $6 million per election cycle. So rather than issuing the 31.5, every 2 years, you start up what we call a bond cycle program. You go to the voters every 2 years and ask for $6 million of general obligation bond authority to sell those bonds. What it does for this commission in this county is provide a stable source of revenue that can be used and applied to capital projects throughout the county. It gives you certainty in knowing that there's $6 million to spend every 2 years on road projects or whatever it is this commission decides, and it also leaves the property tax levy exactly where it is. So while taxes will not drop, they will not increase either. So it's an opportunity to take advantage of that capacity that you will soon lose in a few years, and put it to public projects within the community. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, on slide 9, the numbers for those $6 million pieces, the assumption here is that you go to election in 2018 with a question for $6 million. On slide 9, you can see that there would be a bond issue of $3 million in 2019, and then a bond issue of $3 million in 2020, and then go to election again in 2020 for an additional. So you get to see how this cycle works, so that you have this continued flow of capital that's coming in, and again, without a property tax increase for the residents. Mr. Chairman, the rest of the presentation I will not take you through in detail. I always like to provide clients with a market update. Needless to say that we've seen volatility in this market. Because stocks have gone up as rapidly as they have, local governments are having to pay more in terms of interest to attract investors to buy municipal bonds. The Tax Reform Act that President Trump signed lowered taxes on high net worth individuals who are pretty avid or frequent buyers of municipal debt. Because those individuals are buying it as a hedge against taxes. Also, local banks and institutional investors, their taxes have all gone down. So the incentive for those buyers to come into this market and buy the bonds has lessened a little bit. So in other words, interest rates have risen, and we're starting to definitely see that in the rates that are being required. On slide 12, you get a historical perspective of tax-exempt rates. And I would just point you there to the very sort of right-hand side of the column. Every trend right there is starting to rise. The Fed has announced and has already taken action on this of increasing interest rates. We expect at least 3 more rate rises over the next year. So all in, and I've been saying this to you and previous commissions for several years. We keep thinking that rates are going to rise, but for 6 years they stayed abnormally low. And that was a great time to borrow. This is now the new normal, is where we're going to start seeing rates in the 4 and the 5 and the 6%. And if you look historically at rates, those rates were at 6 and 7% back in, in 2000. So not out of line. It just certainly is not where we've had this really nice 6-year span of very, very low rates. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll stop, answer any questions that you or the commissioners may have.
Any questions? Mr. Valenzuela?
Well, of course.
Sure, go ahead.
So I guess the crux of the question is do we want to lower taxes for our constituents, or do we want to keep them the same and find some project to build? And I think if we have a project that is needed, that might be something we want to do, but I don't think we ought to just go make up a project just to do this. And it's obvious that you'll lend us more money than we can pay back if we let you. So I guess that was more of a statement than a question, but it's good to see you, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Didn't know you had changed outfits.
Yeah. And on the level of debt, you know, the 4% limitation the state puts on, I think is very conservative. It's prevents, you know, an investment banker like myself from putting you into too much debt, so.
Yeah, you know, there are things out there that I've been sitting here running through my mind that we could help. I mean, we've got a hospital that's flailing, we've got a couple of other things that maybe we could do, but I think we have to put our heads together and... Oh, that's your job.
What's the time frame for a decision to put this bond measure to the voters?
So it would be helpful to get the election question out at least 3 months prior to the general. And I would really defer to your staff on what that timing looks like, but minimum 3 years, probably more, 3 months, excuse me. It'd be more like an action in June or July timeframe, and again, that's really your staff's call.
In the past, the most time we waited was, I think, August. Is that about right, Abby?
I'm not remembering, I have to look it up.
But I think that's about as late as you can go. Maybe you could do it in September early.
And I wonder if you could explain the advantage of going every 2 years for $6 million rather than, let's say, every 4 for $12 million. Is it strictly a sticker shock idea?
It's definitely sticker shock. It's also interest cost. So you could issue $12 million.
No, I'm not talking about the issuance, because I understand you can phase the issuance as long as you've been authorized.
Right.
So I'm talking about the vote.
It's really sticker shock in that sense. Yeah, that's right.
Because there's some cost to holding the election. I don't know what that is to add one measure to an election, but it strikes me to be slightly more efficient and slightly more upfront and transparent to say this is our plan for 4 years rather than just 2.
Several communities use this 2-year tool because obviously it matches every time there's a general election, but it also allows them to have a more continual conversation with the community where they'll develop a capital improvement plan, and they'll tie those improvements in that plan to the general obligation bond question specifically.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
Other questions?
No? Well, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Good to be here. Thank you.
Moving along to agenda item number 8, discussion of the Holloman Air Force Base proposal. Mr. Rao?
Yeah, and I want to start by thanking my fellow commissioners for indulging another discussion. We had one in March. The reason for this discussion, we had one in February. I've been thinking ahead a lot. It's budget season. And in that discussion in February, you all raised a number of points that I thought I would like to know more about as well. And they were the importance of a county resolution, its relevance, and the timing of doing it. Right? That was one key issue that we discussed. There were questions raised about that. Another was the potential for fire and the potential impact of fire. And another was the potential economic benefits of the Holloman Air Wing, and in particular the benefits to Grant County, as well as the potential dangers to the county. So to address those 3 points, we've got 3 members of the community. Mr. Jerry Engel, who has lots of experience with NEPA, we thought was well qualified to discuss the timing and the relevance of a board resolution during the NEPA process, because that's what we're talking about doing. And Mr. Jesse Franklin Owens, who's some sort of officer with Whiskey Creek Fire and has volunteered to talk about the fire issue. Maybe you can explain your experience when you do that, Mr. Franklin Owens. And Sissy McAndrew, whom we're all familiar with, to discuss economic impacts. And we've asked them to limit that to 5 minutes each for a total of 15. So thank you. And Mr. Engel, if we could start with you, that would be great.
Did you want me to time them on 5, 5, and 5, or 15?
I would say 5, 5, and 5, and we'll just give a hint, so we're going to be polite. It's not exactly the same as a public input session.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about timing on comments on environmental impact statements.
I think your button may be off.
Pardon?
On the mic, there you go.
Is it red?
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about timing on comments on environmental impact statements, and specifically in relation to the Holloman proposal. To begin with, I'll give you a little bit background information, and I may end up covering some NEPA things that you already are familiar with. If I do, I'm sorry for that, but I'm not exactly sure what your familiarity is. So to begin with, there's about 3 levels of analysis of documentation on the National Environmental Policy Act. The first one is categorical exclusions. Those are usually used when the agency feels like there's no environmental impacts or no significant environmental impacts. Environmental assessments, those documents are used to determine if there are significant impacts and then make a decision if there are not significant impacts. And then the environmental impact statement. And the Air Force specifically says that this document, an environmental impact statement, is the most intensive level of analysis. It's used when the project is likely to create significant impacts or is likely to be controversial in nature. By choosing the environmental impact statement for the Air Force project, the Air Force is basically saying that this proposal is a big deal and that it's likely to have significant impacts and be controversial. Once the Air Force made that decision, they started the environmental impact statement process. One of the first steps in that process is called scoping. This part is supposed to help the Air Force get information from the public and officials representing the public, like you all, on things that the Air Force does not know about, or to determine specific public issues and concerns. It's required by law. The scoping process drives the analysis and determines what types of things the Air Force considers in the analysis. In some of their publications, they've specifically said that the environmental impact statement process is focused on issues and is not encyclopedic. In other words, they have to consider the things that are required by law, but other things that aren't brought to their attention, they don't necessarily have to consider in that process. So if the county government is concerned has concerns on the proposal and the proposed effects on the county environment, or how the project could affect county citizens, economies, etc., y'all would need to bring those to the attention of the Air Force, or they might not be considered in the environmental assessment process. I feel that with only 3 meetings that the Air Force scheduled, and none here until after the official scoping process was concerned, it kind of indicates that the Air Force has not made a real hard attempt to try to find, or to try to get comments from the local people here and from the local governments here. And I think that makes it even more important that the county and the local people provide the Air Force with comments and with concerns that they might have regarding that project. Even though the official comment period ended only 2 weeks after the September meetings that the Air Force had in 3 communities, not including this one, the Air Force has stated on the record that they will still accept comments and include them in the administrative record. I feel that it's important to provide comments to them and to make sure that they understand the county's issues and concerns, so that those things are addressed in the environmental impact statement, before the draft environmental impact statement. If they're not, your comments might not be included in the environmental impact statement. If you have made those comments and they're on the record, then you'd have a good reason to go back to the Air Force and say, why weren't those comments considered? And lastly, one other thing is that in my experience, agencies like the Air Force seldom switch preferred alternatives after the draft environmental impact statement is published. They often make changes in alternatives as a result of public input and governmental input on the draft environmental impact statement, but very seldom do they actually switch alternatives. So if the county has substantive issues and concerns that could result in in the Air Force picking a particular alternative, I think it's very important that those comments are made to the Air Force before they go complete the draft environmental impact statement process and choose that proposed action in the draft environmental impact statement. So that's basically what I've got. Anybody have any questions?
Thanks. Any questions?
All right.
That was very informative. Thank you. And next.
Good morning, Commissioners and County folks. I have an information packet. If I can have permission, I'd like to hand to you all.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
That's it.
So my name is Jesse Franklin. I'm with Whiskey Creek Fire Department. I've been there for, this is going on my 7th year. In addition, I've been working as a contractor for the Forest Service for the past 25 years. I've worked on every major incident on the Gila since 1993, large fires in northern New Mexico and throughout Arizona. The reason I gave you a packet there is that the amount of information that we've been able to collect since I last addressed this body is large and isn't going to fit in 5 minutes very well. So that's why the purpose of that. One of my duties at Whiskey Creek is that I am the updater for the Smokey the Bear sign. So when you see fire danger level, etc., that's my particular job. So every day I look at what Gabe Holguin was showing you earlier about fire danger level. So on the packet that you have there, what you have is, at the beginning of it is just, this top half is just a copy of this report, okay? And this is all written by the Air Force, and it's about environmental effects of self-protection, chaff, and flares. So this is from the Air Force. So that's to let you know where that came from. The other information that's below here is how you can easily access that site that Gabe was talking about. So every morning I Google, I get on there, I see where we're at for the day. If I need to go change a sign, I change the sign. And on the very bottom, I just put down the last 3 days information. So on the 4th, the west half of the Gila in Grant County was in high fire danger. The east half of the area was in very high. And then you look the next day, we're at moderate everywhere. The day after that, so today, the western third of Grant County is in moderate danger level. The eastern 2/3 of Grant County are now in high fire danger level. And then I put the word islands on there. And the reason I did that is I would encourage you all to go to this site, and then you can see on a daily basis how even within an area like, say, it's moderate in, we'll say, the southwest corner of the state, within that you're still going to find some islands, some little islands that are in extreme or very high. And that island kind of floats around between the northern part of the county or maybe the western part of the county, depending on conditions specific about temperature, moisture, all that. So they do this on a daily basis. The two areas there, they have one, the forecast fire danger, that's what they believe is going to be like tomorrow. And then you can actually go and see what was the observed fire danger. So what do they think it's going to be like, and then what is it actually like? So that's what that information is about there. So what I want to do is I've pulled from the quotes that I'm going to give you are from this report. And then within here, some of what we have, anything that's a quote has a notation, like on page 1 it says 4-27. That means that whole section there is directly verbatim, word for word from the Air Force. That's their words. Other things that do not have that notation are community members that have been researching this. We're kind of giving some background or perspective of what we think about those things. So on that first page, basically, okay, here's a quote from the report. It's a fact that burning flares released from military aircraft sometimes reach the ground still burning. And then they give you a series of bullet points about how is that possible? How could that happen even though it's not supposed to? So I'll move on to page 2. Another quote again directly is, burning flares do sometimes start wildfires. It's hard to tell exactly how often because fires started by military flares are not a category that's tracked in a national or local database. And then recently, when I discussed with you all before, I was on the fire that was up by Buckhorn. I made a correction on here. It didn't come through correctly because it says a military flare dropped from a C-140 started a grass fire, okay? I've corrected that, and down below is my correction. It says it may have started. There's no definitive conclusion that they've come to about that. From my perspective and what I understood anecdotally is that Rancher was filming the aircraft that day, dropping flares, and later that day in that area, that fire came up. That's one of the anecdotal things that we know about that. In addition, I've talked to a rancher and a couple of workers that live up there in Mule Creek. Susie Jerome has said there's actually been a series of smaller fires that have happened, not like on the road where cigarette would go, but in areas that are kind of remote that have happened during these time periods when these aircraft are flying. No, we don't know for sure that there's a direct correlation. There have been a string of 7 fires in southeast Oregon were attributed to military flare use during National Guard training. And 10 years ago, a flare dropped by an F-16 started a fire that burned 22 square miles in New Jersey, and 6,000 people had to be evacuated. If you reference page 7, there's the New York Times article that covers that fire and what that was about. Let's see here. Another issue regarding the flares is the altitude that they fly at, and that's a concern because in most areas of the country that height has been set at 5,000 feet. In Georgia, it's at 8,000 feet, and here they're proposing to do it at 2,000 feet. That's a serious concern, and that needs to be looked at. I'm going to skip the rest of the comments in this thing because I don't have time, and I need you to, if you would, refer to the last part of the packet I gave you, which is a separate thing. This is about, sometimes these things come down and they're duds. They fall to the ground, they do not ignite, okay? This is a documented case of, in a medical journal that happened to a 50-year-old female that lives in eastern Arizona, right over there. One of these duds was on the ground. She picked it up. It exploded. 50-year-old female living in eastern Arizona picked up an object. There was a subsequent flare they called a deflagration. That means when it goes off. And the patient was seen running from the scene with her clothes on fire. The patient subsequently sustained 49% of total body surface area burn. After being admitted for over 50 days, she was discharged to a rehabilitation facility. Included in there is a series of photographs of the consequences of that to her. And the last note here as far as the paperwork goes, in addition to this is on page 4, in addition to this event, it has been reported on a local San Carlos, Arizona police official's website that other deconflagrated flares have been found in this portion of eastern Arizona community. So the concern is fire. That's a real concern. It happens. It can happen. The other concern is safety for the citizens of this county. We want them to end up in Gila Regional Medical Center with the kind of injuries that you see on here because of the duds. I would suggest not.
Any questions for Mr. Franklin?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Sissy McAndrew. I'm a realtor here in Silver City, and this is not really a joke. I'm realizing that this may be something I'm going to have to wear on a regular basis and may become equipment that people need to take with them when they go out into the national forest. One question I'd like you all to just think about for a minute, and that is, when is the last time that you heard an airplane in Grant County? Now, to tell you the truth, I think maybe I heard one last week. I can't really recall, because It's really a rare occasion. It's something, a wonderful attribute that I often talk about when I'm introducing people to our region. And I would hate to have to give up that wonderful quality of life. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the way that we market our community. Our rich mining and ranching history, blend of Hispanic and Anglo cultures, blue skies with 360 days of sunshine, vast landscapes, natural wonderlands, small-town values keep it genuine Americana. We're a base camp for ecotourism and the greatest diversity of habitats in North America. We also have been winning awards over the years. One of the 50th healthiest places to live and retire. One of the nation's dozen distinctive destinations. And that one comes from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. These are all things that we are recognized for. We also have the Continental Divide Trail running through. And that's being used a lot with our wounded warriors to provide them with a space of solace to be able to come and heal. Why do people move to Grant County? For our quality of life, our weather, our friendly people, our sense of community, our rural setting, our natural surroundings, birding, biking, hiking, hunting, fishing, camping, astronomy, and the list just goes on. And they want to get away from the crowds, from the rat race, from the noise, and from the stress. That also just keeps going on. So what is the economic impact of real estate sales in Grant County? In 2017, our sales were the highest they've been since 2007 at $58,541,000, with a median home price of $136,750. The downtown market is active with buildings selling and an actual sense of excitement. With 60 realtors and our sales commissions, we also have other economic benefits to the region. We have incomes from inspections, repairs, construction, septic tanks, surveys, wells, title fees, insurance, utilities, furnishings, food, property, and gross receipts taxes, and so on. Realtors are a true economic generator. How will the flyover zone recognition and stigma affect real estate in our market? This will be a new brand. Sellers will have to disclose that they are in a flyover zone. When a buyer is funding with a federal loan, an underwriter will require for them to sign a specific document stating they understand they are purchasing in a flyover zone. This can affect value, it can also raise concerns, and often kill the deal. And as Mr. Ramos knows, property insurance will even be harder to obtain. Right now, homes in Indian Hills are requiring defensible space of 100 feet from the home. And even then, few companies are willing to take the risk of writing policies. Just imagine what would happen if flares and chaff started a forest fire. Research shows that the decibel level by aircraft above the average ground level increases the effect by reducing the values of properties by 1%. If we look at the $425 million that came into the county for the northern portion of the county near the flight paths, this could impact us by 42.5 to 85 million. We all need ear protection, and we're going to need it out there. We may even need to sleep with earplugs because these volumes are going to be very, very high. This is not the quality of life that I want, and like many, I will move out of Grant County. The economic development for New Mexico is not in this project. Otero County will win with economic growth as pilots and their families move to Alamogordo. But this is literally an assault on Grant County, and we will suffer much greater economic fallout as we lose our wilderness, our forest ecosystems, our wildlife, our tourism, our taxes, and ultimately our population. Grant County cannot afford these flyovers. Are there any questions?
Could you leave us, would you feel comfortable leaving us a copy of?
Sure, I will actually clean it up a tad for you.
Okay.
And drop it off to you. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Engel, Mr. Franklin Owens, Ms. McAndrew, for taking a lot of time, obviously, in packing a lot of information in a very short time, and then for wading through other presentations. I really appreciate your patience and your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9, review the March 8, 2018 regular meeting agenda. Does anyone need a recess, or are we all good?
I'm going to take my own if we don't do agenda.
Could we have a 5-minute recess? Sure.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Meeting recess, 5 minutes. Call back to order the Grant County Commission meeting. Agenda item number 9. Got 2 agendas here. Agenda item number 9, review the March 18th regular meeting. Manager Webb.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. First item, if you will have your regular report from Kathy Arias from Gila Regional Medical Center. You have 3 sets of minutes, the special meeting minutes, work session, and regular meeting minutes. Those are in your packets for review. Moving on to financial reports, item D, approve, disapprove March 2nd, 2018 expenditure report. Randy, would you go over that in Linda's absence, please?
Yes, good morning. In your packets, you have your expenditure report, period ending March 2nd, for a total of $1,843,951.24. Of that is accounts payable total of $1,635,408.12, and payroll check reporting of $208,543.12. To highlight some of the major expenses we incurred within this period, our payment to Has Air Inc. for $16,096. This is for Phase 3 risk assessment and research for the mitigation plan. A payment to Southwest Concrete and Paving for $30,458 for hot mix for routine patching for the county roads. Payment to Western Builders for $28,463 for progress billing for the Santa Rita Fire Station construction. Payment to Bank of Albuquerque for $39,134 for bond interest payment on some bonds. Payment to Gila Regional Medical Center for $68,072 for the January 2018 indigent claims, which you guys approved last month. Payment to the New Mexico County Insurance Authority for $693,992. This is for the 2018 law enforcement and multi-line pool contributions. Payment to Ride Express Fleet Services for $24,370 for the fuel charges for January. Payment to Dement Electric for $19,858 for the emergency generator backup for the Sabio Creek Volunteer Fire Department. Payment to Morrow Enterprises for $22,756. This is progress billing for the Lower Members Volunteer Fire Department water storage construction. Payment for SkyWest Media for $13,284. Marketing services for the period of October to December for the conference center. Payment to Ascent Aviation for $18,920 for February 2018 jet fuel. Payment to the Southwest Solid Waste Authority for $43,746 for the January 2018 tipping fees. Payment to Summit Food Service for $22,587 for inmate meals and medical snacks for January. Tyler Technologies for $11,990 for annual disaster recovery renewal for 2018-2019. And Juniper Advisory LLC, $14,735 for February's retainer and services. Any question?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to new business. Item E, approve, disapprove proclamation recognizing the Silver High School wrestling team for winning the 2018. That's not right. What are they? 3A4? That's how you, wrestling's different than basketball. 2018 Class A to 4A state championship.
Just two people. There's just two people, little schools and big schools.
Interesting. Item F, approve, disapprove proclamation proclaiming March 21st, 2018 to be Grant County DWI Prevention Program and Aldo Leopold Charter School Kick Butts Day. I would like to add an item to the agenda here. Mr. Dan Otero would like to present an update on the TUCASA operations and senior programs, and that's my fault, I forgot to add him. So I'd like to add him in between proclamation and the next item on the agenda.
Say again what the topic is?
Dan Otero wants to give an update on the TUCASA operations and senior programs. He likes to come and give a regular update, and I encourage that. So. And it's my fault because I didn't get him on here. Item G, approve, disapprove the 2018 Volunteer Firefighters Annual Reporting for PERA. This is a consent agenda item for the following departments: Cliff Gila, Fort Bend, Lower Members, Pinos Altos, Santa Rita, Sapio Creek, Tyrone, Upper Members, and Whiskey Creek. This is an annual report that requires commission approval for submittal. Item H, approve, disapprove reappointment of Lodgers Tax Advisory Board. There are two positions that are up, and the two individuals, Becky O'Connor and John, I slaughter his name every time, Rohovic. There you go. And they have requested reappointment to those positions. Item I, approve, disapprove appointment of 9 individuals to the TUCASA Advisory Board. This was advertised, and you had several submittals. You were, there was a voting form that was submitted to you that you were asked to complete. Hopefully assist you in appointing those members. So you will select 4 candidates as community members, 2 HMS providers. We have 2 peer consumer slots. However, we will have to re-advertise for 1 peer consumer slot because we did not have enough interest. And then the appointment of 1 county commissioner, in which Commissioner Edwards has volunteered to put her name in the hat for that. She has been involved. She picked up where Commissioner Hall has left off and been involved in the project.
We're lacking 1 consumer? What is a peer consumer?
A peer consumer is one that has been through the process or been involved in either counseling, recovery, those sort of things. And this was something that we identified way back whenever we were doing the planning and identifying what type of membership you wanted to comprise your board of. So we will have to advertise for that position again.
So when will we get these tabulated scoring sheets?
I can't hear you. Oh, she's only received 2, so if you guys will submit those 2, you can just bring them on Thursday.
Wait a minute, so if we bring them on Thursday, are you going to tabulate those, Bernadette, or are we just going to have an open discussion?
I didn't see what your instructions were. Did you ask them to submit them to you?
She asked us to submit them by noon yesterday. Friday?
Well, I guess the rest of us don't get to vote then.
So if you could,
because we could throw those out and just
do anything we want.
so if you could do your tabulations and submit those to her by end of business today, we can have.
Yeah, and I agree as far as the process, and that's what I wanted to discuss. We don't necessarily have to pick the way it's tabulated, but...
No, but you guys have asked for a process, so we're confused at what direction you want to go. So if you don't want them tabulated, then we won't waste anyone's time.
Do we want them tabulated?
So Abby's saying that we're creating a rolling quorum, so never mind, just bring them on Thursday. You can just make your appointments on Thursday. You were trying to do it like you asked for the last appointment, so we'll rethink this process again.
I apologize for my role in not getting.
It's okay. There's others.
Anyways, you have a list in your packet of those names that have been submitted. And just to reiterate, you need to select 4 out of, the rest of the spots are basically self-determined. You'll just need to select 4 out of the 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 names that were submitted by the community members.
Exactly.
Any other-
Four out of how many?
There was 9.
Okay.
There's 2 slots in this. Any other questions or comments on that? Item J, approve, disapprove appointment of 3 road abandonment committee members. Misha, do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, Chairman, Commissioners. The Road Abandonment Committee, we've had appointed, we did a 1-year term, and I've had more that have come in, and just properties that we need to look at that we use the Road Abandonment Committee for. And in this last process where I had one that we'll be bringing to you, realized that one of the 3 that was appointed had to leave the state. He was able to look at it, but he had to leave the state. And so I asked the other 2 if they wanted to be reappointed, and they did, and we found a 3rd. So this time I'm asking that they be appointed for 3 years, because 1 year didn't seem like it was long enough, given all the different projects that have come in.
Any questions or comments for Misha? Okay. Next item on the agenda, item K, approve, disapprove law enforcement protection fund for 2018-19. This is an annual application that's submitted for what we commonly refer to as LEPF funds for the Sheriff's Department. The application is in the amount of $39,800. There's a base appropriation you get based on our county population of 20,000, and then you receive $600 for each certified officer. In our case, we have 33 certified officers, so that's an additional $19,800 for the total application of $39,800. And this funds, our statute stipulates what they can be used for, equipment purchases, training. They can't go in towards general operational expenditures. Item L, approve, disapprove consent for right of entry regarding proposed Boston Hill Mining District Safeguard Project. I received a letter from Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. They have what is titled an Abandoned Mine Land Program that's in partnership with the U.S. Department of Interior and Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, and also the BLM. And they propose to come in and safeguard abandoned mines, and they've identified the Boston Hill Mining District as an area that needs to have some attention. We have a small portion of land that they've identified, and that is the land behind the courthouse. And what they do is, if we allow them to, we grant them the right of entry, they come in and complete their work at no cost to us. Which recently we've had some conversations with the town of Silver City and some kids playing in the area after school, and the danger of them falling into, the open holes that exist in this area. So, in my opinion, this is a win-win situation. It gets our land safeguard procedures put in place at no cost. And I can see your mind spinning, and I don't know exactly what those exact details are and what they plan to do, but this would be the first step in moving forward.
Thank you. Is that the Davina that was raised here?
Well, part of what I was thinking about was that this has happened before, and we've had some work done there, and I remember there was bat surveys involved in it, and that was Silver City, not county. And we'd be talking about more, there's a sliver of county land. I assume we're talking about more than just that sliver.
Yes, they've identified the BLM land there, there's private land, and the majority of it is Silver City. And that was included in the maps that were in your, but ours is just a small portion, which is located directly behind the courthouse.
You have to do it, it's plugged up, one of those holes.
So some of them have cables over
Yeah.
and other various devices.
Okay.
So basically, they're requesting just right of entry.
And if you've got questions, she sent me enough cards that I'll put in your box. If you have questions, she's more than happy to address those if you want to call her or email her. It's Davina Crosley.
Do you think they'll tear down the old detention center while they're there?
Fortunately, there wasn't.
It's not a mine shaft under there.
There's definitely one next.
So moving on to resolutions. We have our airport manager here to talk about item M and N. Item M is approved, disapprove resolution number R1806, a resolution authorizing submission of an application for airport aid to the FAA, obligation of sponsor matching funds, and authorizing to accept the resulting grant offers and execution of contract documents for the following project. Prepare preliminary engineering report evaluating the commercial service terminal and GA aprons rehabilitation and repairs to the Grant County Silver City Airport.
It's easy for her to say.
Right. Item N basically says the exact same thing, and I'm going to skip all of it other than it's resolution R1807, and the project is to prepare preliminary engineering report evaluating the commercial service terminal code compliance, rehabilitation, and repairs at the Grant County Silver City Airport. And Rebecca can put that in much more easy terms.
I don't know, I think it was all included right there. This is just a preliminary engineering review, so we have the apron that's right outside. For those of you who have boarded the planes, you can see that the apron's pretty broken up. This is for the engineers to come in and evaluate that area, determine the amount of work, and ultimately the cost, so that we can bring that forward to the FAA to request funding to have that project completed. And similar for the terminal, the building is in pretty rough condition. We have roof issues, leaks, electrical, code compliance, ADA. So this would allow us to evaluate those needs and put a cost to it again to take forward for FAA funding. For the county, our portion for both of these together would be just over $2,600, to have these reviews done. All right.
Funding then that you're trying to get, is there a county match involved in that as well?
Ultimately, for the projects that would be done, yeah, we have a 5% stake in that.
5%? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to commend Rebecca for doing it in this order and going out and getting the preliminary engineering reports, so we know exactly what we're looking at, rather than just applying for it and trying to scramble around and come up with our 5% plus a shortfall. So thank you for thinking ahead and planning properly. Appreciate that very much. Next item is to recess from the Board of Commissioners and convene as the Grant County Health Care Claims Board. Item O is to approve, disapprove February 2018 health plan claims in the amount of $10,303.08. There are 7 claims to Gila Regional Medical Center in the amount of $9,594.08, and 1 claim to Gila Regional Ambulance in the amount of $709. Questions or comments? That concludes the agenda for Thursday.
Moving on to agenda item number 10, county report. Since you're the only elected official here, would you like to go first?
No elected officials today.
Oh, no? Oh, I'm sorry. Wow.
You have an election.
No wonder they're not here.
There's an election. You got something to say. Go vote.
I'm going to follow you.
So on Thursday, you vote.
So the municipalities are having an election, we just kind of oversee. We've been here since 6 and we'll be here till after 7, just making sure we're good.
Mr. Freeman, would you like to go?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Commission members, my report for this reporting period. Item number 1 is continuation. Item number 2, our detention facility update. Grant County Detention Facility currently has 3 vacancies. We have hired 5 applicants who have just started their employment with the detention center, and all of them are doing very well right now with their training. Item number 3 is the continuation. Item number 4, on a training update, Sergeant Galindo's monthly training report. Basic training for the newly hired officers is currently being conducted. And also Sergeant Galindo currently attended a recertification for his defensive tactics certification, and this allows him to certify our officers, so we don't have to go out and get somebody else to do it, or we can do it in-house. And he successfully completed that certification, and also we're going to continue to do first aid training until we get all of our officers recertified in first aid and also defensive tactics. And again, we'd like to thank the administrator for the central dispatch. She's the one that's certifying all of our officers in first aid, so that really helps us a bunch whenever we send them down there. She's been doing a great job, so we'll continue to use her, and we thank her for that, for taking the time to be able to do that. Item number 5 under intervention, the Stepping Up subcommittee meeting will be scheduled for April 18th at the Convention Center. On February 28th, we held a meeting for the residential treatment unit, and this meeting was held here in this facility, and the purpose of the meeting was to gather information about the treatment facility. It was a great meeting. We got a lot of information, and we're going to schedule a future meeting to see where we can go with this and the possibility of providing a treatment, substance abuse, and possibly a mental health treatment unit in the facility, and see where we can go with that with funding and possibly legislation. So we're looking into that. I think that'll be a great benefit to the facility and to the inmates and also to our community. A recognition program, we're awaiting nominations for the month. Detention statistics, Grant County Detention Facility, the average daily population for March 1st, 2018 was 81, 3 more than last reporting period. The high population males was 63, 1 more than last reporting period. High population females was 18, 2 more than last reporting period. Currently for March 1st, 2018, there were 84 inmates that were incarcerated in the facility, and that was 6 more than last month that were booked in. Then I have your CJI 5 report for your review. Item number 8, the monthly agency totals for February 2018. Silver City Police Department had 72, Grant County Sheriff Department 21, New Mexico State Police 26, Baird Police 10, Santa Clara had 8, and Hurley had 6, and we had no other arrests. I did put on there that we currently are not holding any inmates for another facility. We just got one in today. We accepted a female from Hidalgo County, so we do have one that we're going to be holding for Hidalgo County right now. We just got her in this morning. The detention facility transports, probation, warrants, and special management. District Court, we had 10 transports. Division 1 Magistrate Court, we had 19. Division 2 Magistrate Court, we had 4, and we had no other court transports. Medical transport during this reporting period, total 14. The total number of transports for this reporting period is 47 as compared to 122. Medical transports pretty much remain the same. The difference is in the transports was District Court and Magistrate Court Division 1 recorded significant decreases in transports during this reporting period. Probation violation inmates, we had 28. We had inmates awaiting sentence to another facility or rehab. We don't have any of them currently. Total inmates charged with warrants was 52, and total number of special management inmates for March 1st totaled 8. That's my report, sir.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Villa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just on the maintenance side, there was some issues with lighting at the courthouse. The DA and some of the courts were concerned that the parking lot at night when they would leave didn't have enough light. We addressed those and we put brand new LED lighting. There was existing fixtures there. We just updated the lighting system and making sure that I went by there last night, so it's pretty lit up for people to see back there. Working with Jason and Rebecca at the airport, I'm trying to get the striping done on the area we made for the parking lot. That's going to be going out here in the next couple of days. Weed control, also working with Rebecca and Jason on that at the airport, cut down on the weeds and over at Baton Park. So we're just getting ready for the warmer parts of the year, working towards, turning off the heat and turning on the cool. If we even went to that this year, I don't know. Other than that, that's all I have on the fire side. We're just continuing to work towards getting ourselves prepared, as Mr. Holguin said, from the Forest Service, working with them, having meetings. You all will also be invited to probably a meeting that we have with all the stakeholders within Grant County in the next month or so, just to so that there's a collaborative effort of what we're doing and how we're going and how we address a major fire in our area. Misha and I, with the help of the planning department, we did apply for a grant with the New Mexico Association of Counties. So Commissioner Ramos, as our board member, please support that for us and help us move forward. It is through the BLM. It's $10,000 to educate the public on areas on fire-wise preparedness and readiness. So we'll be doing that. There's a 10% match, which is $1,000, but it could also be done in kind, and I think with my work and helping out with the program, I think the in-kind would be pretty much would cover that. Other than that, again, I don't have anything unless you have any questions for me.
How often is the E911 updated?
E911 in a sense of? As
in updating numbers and where to call these residents and what have you. Maybe Misha has that answer, I don't know. And the reason I'm asking is because 2 weekends ago when we had a Democrat convention, there was a gas leak over by Western University, and there was people in the building where I was at asking me about that leak, and I knew nothing about it. But half the people that lived on that street didn't get a notice on their phone, which I'm sure they called their actual house, but not their cell phone. So where do they update?
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, so there's several ways of in an incident like that. I was called by Silver Fire as well to try to get with Gilbert, our emergency manager, which he took that as part of what he does. But in the question asked about whether people get contacted, obviously the basic is door to door as they go out and search. The other one is signing up your home phone or your cell phone to reverse 911, so that area would be, but you have to sign up for it. And so in that sense, then those numbers in that area would be sent that there's an emergency and that they need to evacuate. So you do have to put your part as far as signing up to it as well.
Now, would it be too much to ask if they sent me as a commissioner any E911 that's out there so that I can answer to the public whenever
you probably could, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Ramos, is just go to E911 and have them put you on the list as far as, oh no, it's not
E911.
Right, it's not E911, I'm sorry. It's reverse 911.
Reverse 911.
Sorry.
So that's, they can sign up online to do that.
On the reverse
And if you put yours in there, you should be able to get those calls as well. And I didn't get notified of it until well after it was already in the mix, so.
Understood.
Yeah, so, I mean, even in the reverse 911, there have been people that have signed up that didn't get the call as well, so it's just,
And usually we don't find problems until something happens, so that's why I'm asking, how can we reach out and get this fixed?
Well,
Well, this issue's been identified back even whenever I first started, back to the Quail Ridge fire and the issues and some inmate escapes and so on. And so with Barb on board, I think that we're able to kind of work through some more of these issues and find better ways of there's many different users, and depending on who is in charge of whatever incident is how that Code Red is activated. I've seen it used in that manner, or it just being something that's done via dispatch. So we're looking at different options as to be able to use that in a way that's more efficient. Because you bring up a perfect example of you might live in the area, but yet you're not getting the call. Is it being activated properly? Another example was the kitchen fire at Denny's. Should have gone out as a Code Red, and it was a confusion between the off-duty firefighters, and it was going out via Code Red. So there's some issues that we're working through, and it's kind of a work in progress. But this is another example of when we add to the list and how we better manage how that information is being sent out.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ramos, and I know as as working with the volunteer fire departments, we are looking at ways and resources as well to assist central dispatch or to make sure that, some of these issues because, it's all in the money, stuff costs money to update, and we want to be sure that, because we know how important as first responders that dispatch is to the whole, the whole emergency situation. So without them, we're not functioning. So we need to make sure that they have the proper resources that they need to do their job and to notify the people when there is an issue like this.
Thank you.
Further questions? So, we have in our midst a distinguished gentleman sitting next to Mr. who is, we'd like to present him an award. He's completed his, Misha Larish has, not an award, a certificate, sorry. He's completed his certified floodplain management certification with the state, and the press is about to go to sleep, so we thought maybe they'd want to take your picture and present it.
Make sure that they also awarded you a pen that they've asked you to wear with pride.
Certified CFM, Certified Floodplain Manager. Wow, I hope you can say that. You guys want to join us here?
Misha, do you want us down there? We're supposed to...
They come down.
Yeah, okay.
You want to join us, Charlene? You're the one that sent him to school.
Any flooding that happens, put that right in there. Any flooding that happens now is Misha's fault.
Did I get that on TV?
Absolutely. Somebody just got sick up at home.
You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I don't know if the camera is. Somewhere in the process, I lost my... Misha, do you have a report for us? Tell us how hard it was to get that.
No, it was very difficult. Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. On Tucasa, the furnishings are scheduled for next week. So starting next week, we'll have all the furnishings delivered and installed. We do have some final work going on with the floors and a backflow preventer valve, but that's pretty much where we are. Construction's really close to being done. On Santa Rita Fire Station, the concrete that needed to be poured for some of the sidewalks was slowed due to the Freeport Bridge and the weather that we had. So as soon as they can get that concrete poured, they got told 3 weeks out because of the bridge activity that's going on. That's where they're concentrating. Once concrete's poured, everything else will move very quickly. They're still sitting at about 75% completion on that. The lower members water storage construction is still delayed, like I mentioned last month, and we are going to be working on that internally. We need to meet and discuss some actions today, but we are working on that to try to get that resolved. Asset management plan is just moving forward on schedule. Everything's moving forward with that one. The airport generator, we will have a generator in place. They're going to bring a loaner generator out so that we don't have any issues with the upcoming season. But Caterpillar needs to work through, they failed to complete the Buy American because of the federal monies that's used there. So they have to work through some stuff internally on that. So it was a good catch by our engineering firm, BHI, when they realized that the generator was coming out of Brazil. So that could have put us on the hook if we didn't catch that. Something that's come up just recently is opportunity zones. I'm sure that we've seen some emails on that. I do have a meeting scheduled for next Monday. The New Mexico Economic Development Department, Southwest Council of Governments, Silver City, Santa Clara, Hurley, and Baird have all been invited to that meeting. So we'll get that looked at and figured out. And on the energy audit, Optera is working on the final plan. Hopefully, we'll be able to present that at the April meeting. And Mark Valenzuela is involved, and I do want to point out that this is a great project for bonds, geo bonds. So it does have a large portion that's been presented to us on solar. Pretty much every single building that we have on the program, aside from the airport, makes sense according to what they've presented so far. So, and any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yes. I was sleeping there for a second. Is that all the county reports?
I just have one thing, well, actually two. In our office, we are working through some different processes in order, it kind of goes back to a couple of the audit findings in regards to your P-card receipts and the way the P-cards and fuel cards are handled. And so that's caused us to take a step back and look at different processes and policies within our office so that we can become more efficient. And it's going to require everybody in the county's cooperation when we start requiring some other for you guys to do some other things. Is just we want to avoid those audit findings in the future, and so we are looking at different processes moving forward so that we can be more efficient and compliant with state statute. The other thing, I was contacted by Mark Van Dyke from the Lieutenant Governor's office this morning. They have the Alan Schaefer from the Air Force is in New Mexico this week. And so they are proposing a Q&A with him on Thursday afternoon. If I can pull that off and find a location and get notice published in a timely fashion. So that I will let you know whether or not I accomplished that or not. But he contacted me this morning and thought since Alan was in the state then was willing to come to Silver City that we might take advantage of that so you could have further Q&A with him. So, but that's still up in the air.
So the idea is Q&A with the commission?
With Alan.
No, I understand, but Alan would be taking questions and answering questions from whom?
From the public?
It would have to be from the public, from you, from the town of Silver City. When Mark and when the Lieutenant Governor was in town last week, I guess there was maybe some additional questions, or there was a request to get some additional. I spoke with him for about 5 minutes this morning. So these conversations have been happening with others besides me, and now I'm kind of tasked with trying to pull this off.
But what did Mark want you to pull off? He wanted you to pull off a public question and
It would
answer
have to
meeting?
be public, yes, because if a quorum of commissioners are going to be there, I told them it had to be public. It cannot be a closed-door session. So, yes, the public would be there. I'm looking at trying to find a room in the convention center that would work, that would allow members of the public. I don't know that I can accomplish this I got 30 minutes to get it done, so I have to have it published today.
So I don't mean to take one of your 30 minutes in vain, but I'm curious, is this a commission-hosted public meeting, or this is an Air Force-hosted public meeting that you're arranging?
That is where I told, he called me about 10 minutes before this meeting started, and I told him I didn't have time to further discuss it with him, so I need to follow up with him to determine who's actually hosting this, who's actually running the meeting, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm going to get this accomplished.
I don't know that you can get it done for everybody, because, I mean, even if we got noticed, there's no way on earth to get everybody else noticed that wants to attend that meeting. And all of them would show up, and it would be an illegal meeting for them. And
as one of your 5 bosses, I would not suggest using your time that way. That's just my personal feeling.
Okay. Just letting you know that that's out there, because I'm sure that it will be common knowledge soon that that's been discussed.
Is there a way to move it to Friday?
No, Mr. Schaefer's flying back to DC on Friday morning, so I have a window on Thursday afternoon.
It's all about him. Well said.
So I think it was a last-minute thought on someone's part, but I really don't think I can pull it off. I'm just letting you know that when it doesn't happen, that I'm telling you, I don't think I can get it done.
I mean, if you can, I think it'd be good, but if you can't, then I understand.
And I kind of resent being a last-minute thought. It's not, I'm not just complaining.
I'm kind of reading between the lines there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had about a 5-minute conversation with him this morning. I don't know where this has come
Sure.
from.
Thank you for that.
Just trying to accomplish what we can.
So I would just say I agree with Harry. I think if it can't be a public meeting that's properly noticed for everyone that has an interest in the issue to come, it should not be held. And your next 20 minutes are probably spent better doing something else. Great. Anybody else? Okay, next item on the agenda is commissioners' reports. Commissioner Brown, we'll start with you.
No, I have none today.
Mr. Ramos? Well,
You got a Tuesday report, and Mr. Billings sometimes has a Tuesday report.
yes, but Mr. Billings had to leave, so he is not going to be back.
I have failed to mention this. A reminder that we will have a photographer here at 1 o'clock on Thursday to take your professional pictures for our upcoming professional-looking website, if we ever get it done. So, just a reminder that he will be here, scheduled at 1 o'clock on Thursday.
Great. Thank you, Shirley. So I do have some comments that I'm going to share. I'll take all of your minutes for mine. Thank you. Like every other issue facing us today, the Holloman Air Force Base issue is extremely complex. I don't think we can really blame Otero County and Alamogordo for wanting to create 638 new jobs. And when I get to what I want to say about economic well-being, you'll understand why I say this. But first, let me say that this is a public lands issue. The Gila Wilderness Area, the Aldo Leopold Wilderness Area, the Gila National Forest belong to the public. That's us, all of us. The Native and Hispanic people have been here for centuries, the many generations of ranchers and miners, the hunters, the hippies, the fishermen, the hikers, the artists and the newbies, all of the people who travel from all over the country and all over the world to visit this pristine land. I can't say it any better than Senator Udall recently said in his announcement of the 2018 Antiquities Act that he is sponsoring, and I'm paraphrasing for brevity. Quote, "Plans to protect air and water, wilderness and wildlife are in fact plans to protect man," and I would add women. In New Mexico, our protected public lands are beloved by thousands. They are a part of our cultural heritage and our way of life, and they drive our outdoor recreation and tourism economy, sustaining hundreds of good jobs. Across our country, national monuments and public lands help fuel an $887 billion outdoor recreation industry, which sustains 7.6 million jobs and creates $65.3 billion in federal tax revenue and $59.2 billion in local and state tax revenue. Public lands belong in public hands and should not be exploited by the highest bidding special interests. We must work to preserve New Mexico's public lands for future generations and help grow and sustain the local communities and economies built around these treasured places. Thank you, Senator Udall. This is also an economic well-being issue. I've spent the last 13 years working with low-income families here in Grant County and across the state, and a result of that work believe that we must have a significant shift in how we think about economic well-being. Note that I am not using the language economic development. Recent studies show that for every $1 billion spent on defense creates 8,555 jobs and adds $565 million to the economy. That same $1 billion given to each of us as a tax cut, as a direct tax cut, would stimulate enough demand to create 10,779 jobs and put $505 million into the economy as retail spending. That same $1 billion in education spending adds $1.3 billion to the economy and creates 17,687 jobs. The $2.1 trillion spent on the war on terror since 9/11 has created 18 million jobs. That same amount of money spent on education would have created 38 million jobs. At what point are we going to balance the needs of people with the needs of the defense? In New Mexico, we have 7 Department of Defense installations occupying 3.4 million acres of land, plus all of the airspace that goes along with that. It goes without saying that here in New Mexico, our economy is firmly reliant on DoD spending. And yet, here we are, consistently last or very close to last in child well-being. I believe with every fiber of my being that Nelson Mandela was right when he said the true character of a society is revealed in how it treats its children. What does what we are doing today say about our character? I was curious to know how much better off children and their families were in Otero County than they are here in Grant County, and I found some very interesting data in the Annie E. Casey Foundation 2017 Kids Counts Report and the New Mexico Department of Health IBIS website. In Grant County, the unemployment rate is 6.6%. In Otero County, it is 6%. In Grant County, high school graduation rates are 83%. In Otero County, 68%. The number of children under 18 living in poverty is the same in both counties, 32.4%. Food insecurity in Grant County, 14.5%. In Otero County, 18.9%. The number of children under 18 that have experienced persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness over the last year is 35.2% in Grant County and 36.3% in Otero County. The percentage of children living in high poverty areas in Grant County is 16% and 39% in Otero County. The economic well-being picture looks much the same in Otero County as it does in Grant County and across New Mexico. You can't fault the folks over there for wanting to create jobs. The Lieutenant Governor mentioned last week $2 billion in economic benefit as a result of the permanent F-16 wing at Holloman Air Force Base. Senators Bill Burt and Ron Griggs announced that it would create 638 new permanent jobs in Otero County. I acknowledge that what I'm about to say is an oversimplification of a complex issue, but sometimes a radically transformative shift in perspective happens when we break things down enough to see a new path forward. Let's go back to the number of jobs created by education spending. What if we took destiny into our own hands and spent $2 billion on education in New Mexico? According to the data, that would create nearly 36,000 jobs and add $4.6 billion to our economy. We have the means in this state to do exactly that. What we don't have is the political will to do it. If you take that idea and let your imagination run with it, you can see a brilliant future for our children, their children, and beyond. If our guiding principle was to strategically plan for the health and well-being of our children here in New Mexico, we would not be contemplating using our national treasures that belong to every single person on this planet, really, as sacrifice zones to attract 658 jobs to Otero County. If no one else has anything, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We're adjourned.